Today we're going to be talking about interventions. And the interventions in EDIS is the process by which a group of either teachers or principals can actually see, what's happening with a student and follow progress towards a target. So if you look at the past videos that we have been doing, we were focusing on the data tab, like the dashboard, the custom reports, the report library, the data stories, the widgets. Those are mechanisms that EDIS uses to import data from other data sources and visualize it. Then we talked about assessments. With the custom assessment, somebody can enter a custom assessment score. With the testing engine, it's a full-blown testing platform. And you start getting a little bit more into the user being the actor here, entering information into EDIS instead of EDIS importing information from other systems. Now, what happens is, when you go into something like forms, for example, now the user can build a form with different types of fields like numeric fields, paragraph, open text, checkboxes, dates, data points, right? Users can build unlimited of those forms, and they can keep track of and collect data via those forms. Now, interventions, it's more of a specialized action that you can take in EDIS, where an intervention basically follows the process, the progress of a group of students, right? Going from a baseline score into a goal. You can use interventions for many different things. You can use an intervention to challenge a student that's already doing great to do even better. You can also use interventions to get students to become on par with the students at their grade level. And there's interventions for reading, interventions for math, interventions for behavior, right? There's all kinds of interventions, right? Now, the way we approach intervention is that we have this concept of templates. And the templates are basically a library of all the interventions that the district utilizes. So depending on so see, for example, the templates as a recipe book, right? These are the actual recipes that the district utilizes to solve problems. So if a student is falling behind in reading and the student is a second grader, right, the district probably has an intervention that they use in order to get the student on par with the reading. Now, in the template, it's super easy because you can filter, right? You can look for interventions, for example, the tier, right? The tier means tier 1, for example, is the class of a teacher, right? So if you're a teacher and you're in elementary school and you have 20 students, your tier 1, it's your entire class. So you might choose to have an intervention at the tier 1 level, which means that overall, as a teacher, I would like to take my class from here to there, right? Then the tiers start getting a little bit more aggressive, like, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4, which is sometimes used interchangeably with special education. You can also filter interventions by area, whether it's academic, behavior, or any other area. You can filter by subject, by domain. So basically, in EDIS, you can classify your intervention with a tremendous level of granularity, so then you can actually find the intervention that you think works best for a student, right? So once you look, for example, at an intervention template, you will see the details of it, right? Every intervention, it's going to have, obviously, an ID, a name, a description, then you're going to have the tier, the subject area, the domain, the skill area, what grade levels does the intervention applies. And because all interventions follow the problem-solving process, then you have to come up with a problem definition, a problem analysis, a goal, details of how you're going to go about implementing the intervention. And these are things that are going to really help the interventionist, right, work with the intervention. So those are the intervention templates. So at this point, right, every school district is sitting on a collection of templates, which are like recipes, right, for problem solving in the school districts. Now, actual interventions is when you match an intervention template with an actual student, right? So now you can see, for example, if you click on any intervention, that you will see not only the content that you were seeing at the intervention at the template level, right? But you can also see the progress that each student in the intervention group it's making, right? So now it starts getting a little bit more detailed. So, for example, I can actually see this student in here, click on it, and actually visualize the progress of the student towards the goal, right? In every intervention, you can have multiple students, and each student can have individualized goals, right? So, for example, each student will have an individualized baseline, an individualized target, right? And then we can come up in EDIS with what is the most recent score, what is the trend line pointing to, right? And what is the status of the intervention. So this is something that makes EDIS really productive, because instead of you as a user having to come up with an idea of the status of an intervention for a student, EDIS will do the analysis for you. EDIS will tell you the intervention is on track, the intervention is off track. It would even look for outliers in the data and ignore them, right? So just know that, this status in EDIS is a really smart, productive feature that you will be utilizing a lot. In interventions, you can point to a specific data sources to measure progress. You can either use custom assessments, you can use data that EDIS has integrated from other data sources, and you can also use forms as your data source for the intervention. There's also the ability in the intervention process of linking to third-party custom reports, so that you can visualize data beyond what you're tracking in interventions. And this is the beauty of using EDIS, and it's that the intervention system in EDIS communicates with the EDIS data warehouse. So it allows you to basically connect different custom reports that you have built with data points that might not be related to the intervention, but will be supplemental to your decision making. So, for example, if you're following like a reading intervention, you might also want to be able to link to a custom report that shows attendance and behavior data, so that you can visualize, right, how is the student doing in attendance and behavior on top of the metric that you're already following with interventions, right? So there's all kinds of things that you can do with the interventions process. Just know that each intervention, right, will also be linked into a student profile. So if you go into any student's profile, you will be able to see, a tab that shows the interventions for the student. And when you click on it, you'll be able to see the active interventions that are being worked on right now with the student. And you will also be able to see the inactive interventions. So these are interventions that are in the past, right? But they always remain part of EDIS. And the good thing about this is that as a teacher, you can go into your student's profile and see the detailed work that the interventionists have been doing with the student, right? So you don't actually have to go into the interventions tab explicitly. You could do it if you want to, but you don't need to, because you can look at everything embedded in the student profile. And that is the beauty of all these applications interconnected to each other, right? So, for example, if you are a middle school teacher, you can actually go into the interventions and see, for example, past interventions that the student was a part of when the student was in the elementary level, right? And you can actually read about what the intervention was going after, right? And just basically form a 360-degree view of the student that you're going to be working with at the middle school level. So interventions, unless you're explicit about deleting the intervention, they never get deleted, right? You can deactivate the intervention and they become part of these past interventions for a specific student, right? So just to do a brief recap of what interventions is, right? As we have been moving through all of these videos, we started with data and EDIS connecting to other systems, ingesting information from other systems, visualizing it through the custom reports, through the dashboards, through the data stories. Then we moved into the assessments, where you can have custom assessments where you can input a single score manually in EDIS, or you can use the full-blown testing platform in EDIS with questions, test events, ability to do scoring of your test. Then you move into forms, which is a little bit more advanced way of manually inputting data into EDIS, which allow you to build unlimited forms with unlimited fields, right? And then you start getting more into the actual interventions, which is more advanced, right? That means that now you get a solid picture of the data for your students, and you want to make sure you're setting up a goal with a time, and you can track how the student is progressing towards that specific goal.